Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Orange Crush podcast presented by Chick-fil-A. David, busy week in Tiger Town, busy week for this podcast. Some special guests coming very soon. We're going to keep that secret because why would we spoil the fun and the surprise? But what is already out there for the public to see is Clemson's 2025 schedule. David, looking at it, it's another gauntlet in November, lots of fun road trips. What are your first impressions of what Clemson and Dabo Swinney have in front of them now as they try to get back to the college football playoff?
My first impression is really Friday night at Lousiville in the rain. It's always going to rain in Louisville, Kentucky in November. That's what it does. So you can expect a, 44 degrees in a driving rainstorm kind of a night there at what was once known as Papa John's Stadium. It's a great schedule, I think. And man, we kick it off in a big way with that home game against LSU. And like I wrote in kind of my thoughts piece, Clemson's now 0-3 in their last 3 games against SEC teams. And going 0-4 against the SEC, not a good look, because that's what people are going to point back to as the season goes on. Oh, sure, they can beat ACC teams. They suck. But you can't beat the SEC. I think that game is really important. Dabo Swinney poo-pooed the Georgia game last year. We can lose it. We can still make the playoff. They did. I happen to think LSU is pretty important.
Yeah, LSU starting right off the bat. You have another test. You have a home test. And probably, David, this is off of no intel from either you or I, but I would estimate that's probably a home game in Death Valley to kick off that season. There's always week one's going to be packed. August 30th is going to have a lot of out-of-conference games. I think Florida State plays Alabama that week. There's going to be a lot of interesting conference debates, and those poor Seminoles, if they can't get it turned around, my goodness, with an Alabama team that's going to have a lot of urgency. But it's going to be an LSU team that's bringing a lot of pieces in from the portal. Barry Brown should be very familiar with Clemson fans after that kind of Gator Bowl performance in 2023. This is a Clemson team with a lot of expectations, and how quickly could you flush a offseason of energy and hype with another stinker against an SEC team, also an SEC team that probably underperformed last year under Brian Kelly, looking to have their own sense of urgency entering next year. So that's going to be one of those situations where the season narrative is going to take a nosedive, or it's going to sort of stay at this steady, impressive, positive energy. But that SEC record, David, as you noted, not very impressive.
Yeah, and I thought it was funny. One of my friends texted me, and he said, "Hey, what are you thinking on the schedule?" And I told him, and he said, "Man, I do wish Clemson would start out with Furman and then move up to Troy and then move up a game." And I'm like, "Yep, I'll get right on that, but I don't think they're going to change it based off of your text message there." Shout out to Kevin Selman. But hey, it is what it is, and it's going to be a great game. It's going to be hot. Will it be a night game? Will it be game day? I mean, there's some options out there. It is an SEC team, so automatically you're going to be in the running for game day. Gratuitous ESPN slam there. Anyway, it's going to be I think it's going to be a great Saturday. And, Clemson did, it's kind of like last year. Then you've got the Big South opponent in Troy coming in. App State last year, Clemson rolled them. Man, I can remember Troy coming into Clemson. I forget what year it was. And, it was a game in the fourth quarter against a really good Clemson team.
I believe that was 2016.
Yeah, the national championship. And Troy, has a chance to win that game in the fourth quarter. And they've always been good. And then you got to roll down the highway to a place, man, I feel like I haven't been in forever. And that's Atlanta, Bobby Dodd Stadium, Georgia Tech. Haven't been in Bobby Dodd in 4 or 5 years, I don't guess, because we played, a home game against them in the new stadium down there in Mercedes-Benz. So that got rid of a home game, didn't play them last year. And with quarterback Haynes King announcing about a month ago that he's back, it's a Georgia Tech team that thinks they're going to make some noise. Not easy.
Absolutely. And with Haynes King, last year, been writing up a piece for TigerNet. We get a schedule series, so you can get a comprehensive breakdown that you won't find anywhere else. That's that shameless plug right there. But I'm looking at this schedule, David, and Clemson doesn't play an opponent that they saw last year until SMU on October 18th. So there's going to be a lot of new territory to work around with for this group. And I do want to pose a question to you because I do think it's fascinating with this schedule and this set of expectations. Where is potentially this year's Louisville? A game where you're not really looking for it on the schedule, but a team that could potentially be a landmine for these Tigers, say if they go on a win streak. What's that potential spot that you look at it and go, yeah, maybe on paper doesn't pose a threat, but I could potentially see this team being a problem if Clemson doesn't have their P's and Q's in order?
Well, I think that game I just mentioned, Georgia Tech. Man, Georgia Tech is, again, they're good. This is a team that took, Georgia to the wire. They talked to Brent Key, the head coach at Georgia Tech, the other day, and he was talking about how, he has the final score of that Georgia game as his screensaver on his phone. And, this is the team that's really trying to, make their way in the ACC and in the national consciousness. They had some good games last year. Man, there's landmine number one. And Bobby Dodd has, kind of been a house of horrors at times. Atlanta has been a house of horrors at times for Clemson. I can remember going down there and bless his heart, Ron Cherry throwing a flag on Thomas Austin on a non-holding play to negate a long throw to Jacoby Ford from Kyle Parker that cost Clemson a win. And I talked to Ron Cherry about it one time. And I said, Ron, did you know that flag, you didn't need to throw it? Oh, yeah. And I've talked to Thomas Austin about it, but I saw the guy fall down. I thought he was holding. Thomas Austin, 2 holding calls in his entire Clemson career, both from Ron Cherry, both holding against Georgia Tech to cost him. How about that? There's your trivia for the day. I can remember them running a guy on the field late down there to kick a field goal to win a game. I can remember, Bebe going wild against Clemson. I can remember the non-punt, ACC championship game down in Tampa. But Bobby Dodd, not an easy place to play. Clemson has all the momentum, way back when, 2014, I guess. Did we go down there? Deshaun Watson tears his ACL in the first quarter. Cole Stout, ineffective. Landmine number one, Georgia Tech, Bobby Dodd.
Yeah, Georgia Tech's going to be a fun, fascinating watch in 2025 just because of the season. And you look at the season record for them, 7-6 last year. It's very deceptive, 7-6, because you have the loss to Vandy in the bowl game where you have the 2-hour-long delay. You had a fan trot out in the stadium and do a Heisman pose and had to get tackled by security. Just a lot of interesting factors, and obviously Haynes King's injury plays a significant role in that as well, with a shoulder injury where he has some gutsy performances, one against Miami, where Georgia Tech was the first team to give Clemson a little bit of a bump in that ACC championship race. But the one I'm looking at actually is Duke on November 1st. I think that Manny Diaz has got something brewing here, and you bring in the quarterback transfer from Tulane, where if they can figure it out on offense, it's one of those defensive mastermind coaches that just never seems to have the right pieces offensively, but they've always competed in certain games. Watched them a couple times this year and just thought they could get the quarterback right. This is a special team potentially in the ACC. If this kid from Tulane figures it out, I could see Duke being a team coming into Death Valley. Ironically, on that same date that Louisville beat Clemson, that November 1st, start of a 5-game gauntlet, that could be a team that presents some problems, especially on the defensive side of the ball against a more air-raided scheme for Garrett Riley.
Yeah, and I like what Manny Diaz is doing up there. And, they're helped out by the fact that you can pay players now and you can convince people to come up and play in Durham, which is, look, they've made, some really nice improvements. We were up there a year ago to that stadium. They actually have a press box now, which is great. I think one of the first trips I ever took up there, I sat in a doctor's office. And longtime media people will know, man, I sat on a folding table looking out of the window of a doctor's office. That was our press box seat. And then they had emptied out another doctor's office. And yeah, that was part of their sports facilities there. So they would empty out a doctor's office and put media looking out of windows out of doctor's offices up there. And that's when I kind of gave it the name, they call it Cameron Indoor Stadium. And I call it Wallace Wade Outdoor Stadium just as a joke. But, they've made a lot of improvements up there. You still have to walk 22 22 or 23 miles from the visitors' locker room to the stadium. It's always going to be that way. But, I like what Manny Diaz is doing up there, and I can see that kind of being a landmine. But, last year the landmine was Louisville, and I'm looking at Louisville again as kind of a dark horse. And Friday night, I can remember a Friday night, up at Syracuse. I mean, it's tough. Friday night at Syracuse, not fun. And sometimes you get your guys out of whack. I think that's going to be another, fascinating game.
Yeah, and the Clemson road successes this year in 2024, I guess last year technically now, they started to establish a little bit of rhythm where 2023 was more of a just hold your breath and see. Obviously, the quality of opponent probably wasn't as up to that standard as maybe their home schedule was. But David, I would be remiss. People have seen the hat if I didn't talk about it. Clemson's got a 2-game road trip in October, starting with Bill Belichick in North Carolina and then Boston College. It is really interesting, David, and I know you're going to laugh about this just because of the background that I have with it, but it's interesting to see the perception. This could be this year's Colorado, where if North Carolina does a semblance of anything successful, there's going to be a lot of eyes on that matchup, particularly because of the head coach. But maybe I just want to talk about it for a bit. I don't want to be overly excited about the opportunity to go cover a game with Belichick in it, but just this matchup, it's going to be interesting. I think at the very least, he's going to have 2 weeks to prepare for this offense. The open date for North Carolina is right before their ACC opener against Clemson. Dabo Swinney versus Bill Belichick. That's not something I ever thought I would say. Probably.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Ever.
Who's going to be his quarterback for that game? Who do we think it'll be?
Probably their 4-star that they just recruited. I think Bryce Baker's got a chance to be the quarterback.
His name is not Tom Brady, though, right? Bill Belichick cannot win without Tom Brady. I'm just telling you. If Tom Brady's
not doing this. We're not doing this. We're not doing this now. I refuse to entertain that discussion. This is about college football and Clemson. This is a Clemson podcast. We won't do it. I'm not going to fall into your trap. We're not doing it. We're moving on.
I just wonder how Bill's going to fit in up there. Bill is he's grumpy. He's surly. Maybe not so much now that he's got the however old the girlfriend is, 23. I don't know. Now that he's got the young girlfriend, maybe he's not as grumpy and surly as he was. But he wears the sweatshirt. He's got the hoodie. That is a wine and cheese crowd. They park their Volvos outside of the stadium. They open up the little hatchback on the back of the Volvo. They pull out the wine. They pull out the cheese. They pull out the crackers. They have their sweaters tied around their neck. They have on their chinos and their loafers. And, how's he going to fit in with that crowd up there? As long as he wins, I guess it's going to fit in, just fine. That is a great trip. I love going up to Chapel Hill. I love Franklin Street. I love going to get something to eat down there. I love kind of, roaming through their fraternity and sorority row. There's you're heading, through campus down to Franklin Street. Great trip for me. Really like the stadium. Another one that's had a lot of improvements over the years. I think I read, though, that they're changing the turf in the stadium, and so maybe not quite as hot. When we were there a few years ago, that Trevor Lawrence, remember the tackle, was it, Xavier Thomas, somebody made the tackle on the 2-point conversion. It was the other side of hell hot in that stadium and on that surface. So that's going to be another fun one. And, October it's great. And it's my favorite ACC road trip is Boston.
Yeah. How about that? It's funny. We get to go see Belichick and then close to where he used to coach in a span of 2 weeks, which is going to be fascinating. I know I'm continuing to hammer this home. I'm begging the NFL to schedule a Patriots game that weekend because I will stay and go to a game and watch them because that's the only opportunity. That's as close as I'll get up at Chestnut Hill. But David, you've been to Boston College plenty of times. You've been to Chestnut Hill. This will be my first trip next fall. What is it like? Take us behind the scenes.
I love it. I think it's a great trip. In fact, last year I did a little something different, or the last time we were there. I usually ride the train because I stay somewhere in downtown Boston, and then I ride the train up to Chestnut Hill. It's kind of the end of the line, when it's time to get off, and you can walk through campus. Did that again last year, and just Brandon Rink went on ahead, and I just walked through all of the tailgates, walked through People having a great time. It was a beautiful sunny day. It is a gorgeous campus. It is gorgeous. Now, is the game day atmosphere great? No. If you get it, sometimes at night it can be a little cold, can be a little windy. But just because that is a great trip, we're going to go in early. We've gone in early before, and we've taken the ferry out to Martha's Vineyard. We've driven out to Cape Cod. One year we, because you're only an hour from Maine, once you land at the Boston airport, we drove up to Maine, did Portland Head Light, Augusta Light. We hit the lighthouse tour. It's just a great city. And then, if you like to walk, you've got the history walking tour in downtown Boston. You've got the North End with all of the Italian restaurants. I know I've got my favorite, which is down there. It's not a tourist spot. It's, it's one of those spots where you've got the 4 Italian guys sitting outside playing checkers, guarding a Cadillac, and they who they are, and it's just kind of fun. You got Mike's Pastry, Modern Pastry. Last time I was there, I went into Modern Pastry. I like Modern Pastry better. Kathleen Sweeney and a bunch of the coaches' wives came in behind me. They were on a pizza tour. And it literally is a tour. They put you on a van and they take you to all the best pizza restaurants down in the North End, and you get to try, a slice or two in every place. And I love it. And, one year I got held up trying to get up to the press box. There's only one elevator to the press box. And they were like, you got to hold it for Father so-and-so. I wasn't allowed up in the press box. Then another time it was held up and it's like, yeah, hang on. Got a VIP coming. It was Doug Flutie. So I got to ride up with Doug Flutie, talking about a Boston College naked game. So great trip. Always my favorite. We're going in early again. Where will we go? I don't know.
I'm excited about that one for sure, just because of the you laid it out well. You should be a travel advisor. Maybe you were in another life. Who knows? But the final game that I'd love to touch on, and it's going to be the one where you're going to have the eye rolls. You're going to have the stakes, the pitchforks. They're going to be ready. But it's Clemson ends the season in Columbia, South Carolina. I can see you doing the proverbial eye roll there. But it's always interesting.
Time to collect the rent at the cockroach.
That's right. And you have the fascinating thing about South Carolina is just the sort of the atmosphere and the layout they have there. The first time I went in 2021 was certainly a whiplash compared to the tailgate scene here at Clemson. But David, the matchup carries a lot of weight this year. Should be another top 15 matchup if I had to guess. Just depends on how South Carolina, if they're consistent, building off of a pretty good season last year. And maybe it'll be the winners of the road. I think at the last 4 rivalry games or 3, the victor has been consistently on the road. 21, yeah, it's all been on the road for the last couple of years. So maybe Clemson gets the win in 25 on the road in Williams-Brice. But, man, it's going to be, I think, a packed schedule. I think Clemson's schedule is not going to be one where you're going to be looking for a team to be good. I think there's going to be plenty of quality opponents on this one.
Plenty of quality opponents. I always like going down to South Carolina too. Don't get me wrong. It's great. And in fact, I came up with, a very nice stat. Last time Clemson played down there, it's kind of interesting. Shane Beamer, he's now 2-0 in Death Valley. How about that? But if you are a South Carolina fan and you have followed this rivalry and you were born in the year of 1976, you have seen your Gamecocks beat Clemson in Columbia 4 times.
4.
In almost 50 years. 4 times in Columbia. So it's just really weird, some of the numbers that are, in this series. And, of course, Clemson will be looking for payback. And, it's really funny. You talk to South Carolina fans, and they're like, man, we beat Clemson and deserved to win. Absolutely. They felt like it was, showing the program's crossing. And Clemson fans will go, man, if it wasn't for that defensive coordinator, if they just kept the linebacker on the field, if the offense, Clemson fans are like, we were the better team. We showed we were the better team. And we still lost. So that's what makes rivalries great, right? Everybody feels like that it, was, some kind of huge statement. So it's fun. And I can't wait to get back down there.
We can't wait to dive into the schedule. David, do you have any more final thoughts before we wrap up today's little wrap-up on the schedule of 2025?
Just a few more. It's really funny that this is, again, September, not always a great time to see a game in Death Valley. So we got a couple of home games. It's hot. We know it is. Everybody's going to have the water bottles. But once again, one game in October, that's when things really start to settle down. And, you've got the one game, and that's it in October. And then you have that final crush of November where you're going to be packing 5 games into 28 days. That's a lot. and one of those on Friday night.
But you do have that Furman scheduling break. You do play the Paladins right after that Friday night game. So sort of a break, but it sort of mirrors last year's gauntlet where you play 5 games in November. Clemson went 3-2 in that stretch. So it's going to be an interesting season, David, really with the expectations that are heightened as they are. Each loss or win could be that much more magnified as we get closer and closer to the start of spring ball, which is April 5th, or the spring game is April 5th. Spring ball will be a little bit before that. And then we'll get straight into June camps. And before we know it, man, we'll be back in fall camp talking about the Tigers once again. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
And I do want to say this. Don't forget, everybody, Fort Hill, Chick-fil-A, Fort Hill recruiting wrap next Wednesday in the Poe Indoor Facility. The new transfers will help. Jeremiah Alexander, Tristan Smith, they're all going to be there. They are going to speak. New defensive coordinator Tom Allen, he will speak. His first chance talking to the Clemson public. Get to shake his hand. I think there's going to be a chance for photos with some of these recruits after the event is over. Tickets are still available. I think there's somewhere over 100 and something left. Talked to Leslie Callison yesterday at the Fort Hill Clemson Club. Lots of great things are available on the auction. You can go out to eat at Calhoun Corners, I think, with Tim Beret. I think there's going to be a meal with Graham Neff. There's going to be time that you can buy some kind of package with Matt Luke. All kinds of great auction items. Some games down at the Atlanta Braves. So make sure you take a look at our update and go click on the link. Get tickets. I'll be there.
Get tickets now, says David Hood. That's probably an order I'd want to heed out. But guys, thank you as always for tuning in to the Orange Crush podcast presented by Chick-fil-A. We're going to have a lot more. We'll get some special guests on the way to fill this time. Basketball, we're going to have a lot of coverage there. The Duke matchup, that's going to probably be a podcast-worthy episode, depending on how that one goes down with Mr. Cooper Flagg coming to town. Guys, thank you as always for tuning in. Subscribe to TigerNet, and take care. God bless.